So let me summarize. There's a lot of cool stuff. Like if you want to implement this, you basically go and apply it in audit mode to figure out, okay, like you obviously have like default stuff, but you want to figure out, okay, what are the things which are I need to customize and basically whitelist uh, to do that, right? And then you basically create that supplemental package. You apply this as well with kind of like an allow rule, saying, hey, this is the things which we actually like internally allow, which our company allows, and then you can put it in enforce mode and say, okay, now we are secured on that way. And then the next thing is like, okay, there's obviously certain ways you just explained to actually do all this in a certain scale. But it's also a way of like, okay, I need to monitor this as well, right? So there's everything is built in. You can use it very manually on the machine itself, build your own tooling, build your own scripts, build your own, like use whatever you have basically to make it work. But then you can also use some like stuff like Azure Arc, for example, with Azure Monitor to connect this. And I think we're going to dive into this as well. So there's like a couple of things, but to be honest, to me, it sounds very, very simple to actually do it. I was always afraid that this is like something which is very, very complex. But actually, I think like if I would be in charge of a larger, like not even a larger environment, but of like a IT environment, this is one of the first thing I think I would do, because I can see that it really like really takes away a lot of the attack surface, and makes it very hard to actually like get like something in there or do like for malicious attacker to do something. Welcome back. I'm Thomas, and again, joining me today is Carlos to talk a little bit about more about Windows Server app control and how this is important for customers. So, welcome, Carlos.
Hey, Thomas, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. So, obviously, again, we did another video before where we talked about Windows Server app control and security baselines. And some of the comments said, hey, we want to know more about app control and how this actually works and how you can implement it at scale and when is the right time to actually use it. So, here we are, and let's do this other video. So, to get started, can you explain us a little bit like, okay, when is the right time to use app control and how does a customer journey actually look like when you want to implement this? Because there's many questions is like, is this the right like system to actually implement this on Windows Server or should I implement it anywhere?
Yep.
So what is the right way?
Well, again, I'm so glad to be here with you today. I mentioned in the previous video that app control in the server world, it's been there for quite some time, actually since Windows Server 2016. And when I talk to customers, is a very common question that I get is, well, if I am not concerned about ransomware, which somehow everyone is, but is that all I get when I deploy app control? It is true though that commodity ransomware will be a vector that app control can help you with, but it's not the only one. I mean, there is other vectors from internal attacks where we see a lot of signals that internal, either a malicious administrator or maybe just something that it just happened without the knowledge of that, individual, run something on the server that it shouldn't, right? So when it comes to production servers, I think you already told me, like, now that I know more about app control, how is this even possible that people is not doing it by default, right?
Yeah.
So that's it, right? So that's why. So we're taking steps towards simplifying the process, the adoption process, because it is super important and super critical for customers to do it, but they need to do it in the right way. So we're trying to invest from our Edge Security team that I belong to help customers to adopt that technology, which is inbox in Windows Server and in client. So on the server side, let me walk you through that journey, if that's okay with you. So I
Yeah,
have this
let's do.
small presentation, few slides, just few slides. So this is how it looks on a Windows Server, for example, 25, right? So in a day zero scenario, basically, customer will start deploying Windows Server, right? Let's say through traditional template deployment or through the what we call OV, which is out of box experience, and then you get your Windows Server 25, right? Then one of the big things that we did recently on 25 that probably nobody talks most about it is we used to have in the team a list of what we call block drivers. I can explain to you the user block list that we have in the previous video. I can touch base again today, but there is another very important aspect, which is what we call vulnerable block drivers, which is basically, as you know, Windows has a kernel mode and a user mode. Many of those high privilege executables or processes are running in a form of a service or a kernel driver. That's basically something that it always executes in a high privilege environment. Let me give you an example. Your network driver or your video card driver, those are executing those high privilege. So it happens sometimes that either bad actors use those drivers to do malicious things because they discover a vulnerability in it, or basically they uh, try to replace or implant that driver if it was a valid driver, but actually it's a malicious driver, right? It has the same name, it looks the same. Even they can have like all sign, certificates associated to it that it really looks legitimate, but it is not.
Yeah.
So one of the big things that we did in 25 is to include that vulnerable block driver by default in any new installation. You don't need to do anything else. Just deploy it and it's there for you. Okay, and it is actually part of the overall story of Act Control. And then basically the next step, right, would be for you to start using the policy that we crafted for you. That I also showed you on the previous video, but I'm going to just redo it for you today. One of the reasons why we prescribe these policies is because in the past, I heard I helped many customers, and I helped many customers to go through that process, and I heard from them, like, man, Carlos, I mean, just to get that policy ready for you to rumble and to work in your system, just for Microsoft itself, it is complex, right? We still have and we still provide what we call templates, but those templates needs to be manipulated. So what we decide from the Edge security team again is to create this form of experience, which is one-liner command, if you remember, where you go on and implant that Microsoft policy for user application. That's your day zero. Basically, that's where you start. Um, then, if you remember, the story is if you go in enforce mode and you try to run any third-party application, it will be prevented to run, basically, right? Because our policy only allows Microsoft code. So what you should do, right? So the idea is you're going to turn app controlling in what we call audit mode, and then you're going to start running the application that you are willing to whitelist or validate in your ecosystem. Uh, while you do that, you're going to start creating or generating those events in the event log saying, hey, this application A or foo or whatever will be blocked if you were in enforce mode. But with that information, we can extract that data from those event logs and then create the final list of your applications. That's basically the process. And then I'll show you there is few ways to do this from a very manual way through an application that is called wizard or app control wizard to ingest that data and create these what we call supplemental policies. So the key work here for you, Thomas, is if you want to do the same, you need to do two things. One, apply the policy, one-liner through OSConfig, and create a list, one supplemental policy that accrues any other application that you are willing to allow. That's it.
Okay.
And then you're able to go to enforce mode. In a sense, that's how we did it. So we put these few bullet points for you, and then through that process, you can definitely do multiple iterations, right? So you craft, you supplement, you test, you adjust as many times, or if you introduce new versions or you introduce new application, you will need to either modify the current supplemental policy or create a new one, right? You can create multiple supplemental policies, and that's it. So in a summary, and I showed you the other day, what we have is these Microsoft provided scenarios. for app control. That basically is using OSConfig. I'm going to show you in a moment in the demo. We created 2 policies for what we call default policy. That's basically, basically any Microsoft code can be run with some behavioral aspects of it. I'm not going to go too ticky into this, but basically, app control does have some parameters that you can adjust of how you want this feature to behave, basically, right? Like you allow policies to be enabled automatically, or you are going to force a reboot to make it happen, things like that. So we did what we thought it is the best default behavior, and we put it together with these allow Microsoft signers, which is how technically we call these, basically certificates that we use to sign our code to allow it. And then, as I mentioned to you, we also created these app block lists, which is on the user mode side. In the same way that I told you before, we have drivers that can be considered malicious. Then we have applications that also can be used for malicious purposes, even though it might be signed for a valid signer, for example, Microsoft. Like I think I gave you this example before, like, do you really want to have, I don't know, debuggers running in production in your, right?
Yeah.
In your servers? Maybe the answer is no, because, if you have a debugger and you have Hyper VPN, you could technically go and read some of that memory of those VMs and extract data from an admin point of view, even though, you don't own that VM, right? So you're attacking your own host scenario, things like that. So app block list also is maintained by the feature team and includes things that we consider could or technically has a vulnerability, a known vulnerability. Let me give you another example of something very funny. So a few years ago, we discovered a vulnerability of an application that is called BG Info. I don't know if you remember what that is, but that's the internal application that the vast majority of customers, they use to splash on the desktop, right? Information about the system, the host, name, domain, IP, blah, blah, blah. So specific versions of vulnerable bginfo.exe are included in that list. So they're not maliciously used to use it as an attack vector for customers. So that's something very cool. And then the last one, which is the very interesting one, is basically what I call bring your own policy, which is where the scenario that you would use and we will use today to create this supplemental policy. That's basically you craft this XML, you pass it through that scenario, and all the magic happens. So OSConfig uses what we call configuration service providers, or CSPs, that will inject that policy, convert it into binary, and inject it into the system basically in real time. And that's how you basically allow applications to start working that they're not previously allowed by or default policies. That's it. That's so cool. And then I have something else, something else that I want to highlight. So app control does have multiple tools to be used. On the server world, it's a little bit different than on the client world side. On the client world, you will see many customers managing app control with applications like Intune, right? We don't have Intune today for server. So basically, the options for you to manage app control natively will be reduced to either PowerShell for some of those actions or internal tool called CI tool that I can show you very quickly. Is basically the inbox tool for you to manage those policies. When you add the OSConfig layer on top of it, we are adding not only the ability to manage those pre-created scenarios, but also we bring the same logic of drift control mechanism that I explained to you previously for baselines. That is, if something remove that policy, drift control will bring it back, which I think is super great. Okay, so same drift control capability that applies to security settings on baseline applies to app controls policies.
Nice. Yeah, okay, so let me summarize. There's a lot of cool stuff. Like if you want to implement this, you basically go and apply it in audit mode to figure out, okay, like you obviously have like default stuff, but you want to figure out, okay, what are the things which I need to customize and basically whitelist to do that, right? And then you basically create that supplemental package, you apply this, as well, with kind of like an allow rule, saying, hey, this is the things which we actually like internally allow, which our company allows. And then you can put it in enforce mode and say, okay, now we are secured on that way. And then the next thing is like, okay, there's obviously certain ways you just explained to actually do all this in a certain scale. But it's also a way of like, okay, I need to monitor this as well, right? So there's everything is built in. You can use it very manually on the machine itself, build your own tooling, build your own scripts, build your own, like use whatever you have basically to make it work. But then you can also use some like stuff like Azure Arc, for example, with Azure Monitor to connect this. And I think we're going to dive into this as well. So there's like a couple of things, but to be honest, to me, it sounds very, very simple to actually do it. I was always afraid that this is like something which is very, very complex. But actually, I think like if I would be in charge of a larger, like not even a large environment, but of like a IT environment, this is one of the first thing I think I would do. Because I can see that it really takes away a lot of the attack surface and makes it very hard to actually like get like something in there or do like for malicious attacker to do something with this. And it sounds, and you will show us, it's not that hard actually to implement, at least like we're going to go through this.
Yep.
So yeah, let's have a look how to implement this and how to apply how to apply app control.
Yeah, so definitely, Thomas. So I would like to show you this. I can go through the VM, right, that I have in my lab, but also I wanted to kind of walk you through the documentation that we go through. So basically trying to demonstrate to you that following our documentation, you're able to do it. So hopefully that works. So we explain about everything that we said here, the audit mode and enforce mode. We basically tell customers go on and use the audit mode first. So one of the first thing that you want to do is use OSConfig. And then we tell you how, right? So first thing you want to have OSConfig install, which is the module that previously we had installed in the system. Remember, because it is the same, basically it is the same module that packages also the baseline. But in case you are not watching or you didn't watch the previous video, let me show it to you, right? Yep. So basically in one command, you can go on install the module. If your system does not have internet access, then you would do a save module, transport that folder basically into the Windows PowerShell folder in your system, and that's it. That's a very simple process. So you, as you know, enterprises normally have multiple shares internally, so the IT team can just grab the module, put it somewhere, and then install from that share module. That would be the way to go. In this case, my system does have internet access, so it's easy for me to go. This should just give us a warning or something, because basically I already have it, so there is nothing much for me to do here. But just to confirm I have it, I can do the typical get module, and that's it. One important thing that we did also is to, I think I mentioned this before, but we kind of wanted to have the baselines and app control scenarios outside of the OS in these out of band, source input, because we want to be agile, right? So we want to make sure that every time that we offer, in this case, a new policy that needs to be created or updated, we do have that capability to show it very quickly. So in the same way that I explained to you for baselines, applies to app control. So if I need to modify or add something to this block place, we can do it very quickly and then provide a new version. Every time that you run any command, any get command or any command from this module, first thing that it tries to do is tries to connect to internet and see the version that you're running, it is the latest one. In case you don't, it will give you a warning, say, hey, you're running a previous version of the module. Do you want to install the latest one? You can do update module. So basically with one liner, update module and the name of the module, so we'll get the latest version and the new definitions for baselines, for Defender antivirus, for app control. And I'm so eager to tell you more about what's coming, but I can't today. But stay tuned, because we're adding way more of those scenarios for you all. Okay, so what we can do now is just apply the scenarios that I mentioned to you. In this case, we're going to do the audit ones, which basically are the one that you see here, right? On the documentation. We recommend you to go first in audit mode, as you just explained, to capture everything that we want. So this should go through. And basically, I have these two policies in place. Okay.
Yep.
So from there, if you need to do something else, like installing applications, things like that, that's the moment. That's where you start basically gathering information about anything that you want to run. In my case, for the demo, as we did last time, I do have two executables here. Today, I'm going to show you the command line version of the error that we didn't do the other day. So basically, this is an application you say is running, but if those policies were in enforce mode, this will be failing, okay?
Yeah.
Because I know this application, it is not using a signer that we allow today. Doing this, basically, I'm capturing this audit event that I can use later on to allow those, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
And now you're saying, okay, Carlos, but you're not actually blocking anything. How can I actually trust you? Okay. So, well, don't trust me. What we're gonna do is easily we're gonna switch modes. Okay. So the best way to do it is you remove the audit mode scenario
Okay.
as quickly as that, and then you apply the enforce mode ones.
Okay.
Um, In both cases, the event will be created. The
Okay.
only difference is normally if you want to test the full functionality of an application, you want to allow it to run, right?
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
interact with the application. This is very simple application through, a small binary compile. But imagine like backup applications, thing like that, or agents that send data here and there. So it might take you maybe more than one command line to test the full functionality. That's why you move to audit, you test everything, then you capture everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but just
So
for the sake of entertain you, if I try to run this thing, the thing now is telling you, nope, you cannot
yeah.
run this thing. Okay.
Okay, super simple. So I have one is obviously the audit mode. It basically creates the event, but it doesn't block it. And then we have the enforce mode, which also creates the event, but obviously, as we just saw now, it blocks it
Exactly.
as well, which is the one I
Mhm.
want to be in the state in, like in production at one point, I guess.
Exactly. So yeah, one important thing, for example, typical scenario is you are in enforce mode and you have an application like an installer.
Mhm.
If the installer will fail to run, you don't actually know what this installer will do after the installation. That's why you need to use audit mode, because the installer will just put things in your system, and then, as you know, a complex application will load DLLs, will call other
Yeah.
executable. There is a relationship between all those binaries packaged into that application. It's not something that just, with the block event will have enough information for you to allow everything. So
So
that's why, yeah.
So I actually have a question to that. So when let's say I have an application which I want to install, right? Do I put it in audit mode before I install the application, or is it enough if I just have like install the application and then put it in audit mode after that to see what's running after it? Or what's the recommended way of doing
The
it?
recommended way is you start in audit mode, right? And
Yeah.
then you install the application, you let the application installer itself work, then you test the whole application functionality again, whatever that is. It can be a
Yeah.
backup, it can be whatever, I don't know, whatever application you want to use throughout the whole process. That process might include install, update, and uninstall. These
Mhm.
three stages cover the life cycle of a given application. And through all that testing, you are in audit mode.
Okay.
Then you capture all that data, create a supplemental, and with the supplemental created, you either test again and see there is new events happening after that supplemental is in place, or you can move to enforce mode to see it still works as expected. And if
Okay.
not, you're going to get more narrow, specific, events for, I don't know, maybe a crazy DLL that they forgot to sign. And I can tell you, that's the funny part, because there is many application that 99% of the package is signed, but they had, I don't know, like a third-party open source DLL that they use, and they just catch it from somewhere, include it in the package, and guess what? It's not signed, and then
Yeah.
you're in trouble. So you want to do that process. Okay, so for this very simple demo, you got this, right? So what you do next? We know that we have events. I can show you the events. We don't want to do that now, probably because it's just too small. And then one of the options that you have, we have it in the documentation, is to use what we call the app control wizard. So App Control Wizard is this standalone application that you can download. Normally, it will work on mainly the IT Pro workstations, from where you can either create new policies, craft, or edit event logs. It's called, App Control Wizard, and then you basically go and install it. I did have it installed already in the server, just for the sake of the demo, so you can see how it works. So from here, the main thing that you could do is to, for example, parse the event log of your system.
Okay.
And that's fine if this is your only system, right? But imagine that you have multiple applications running in multiple servers. You probably don't want to go and install this thing on every single of those scenarios, and then collect the event log, and then see if something is broken, and then rerun this again, and see if something else is broken, as I told you, right? Like lingering DLLs or thing like that. So what's the alternative? So what we did, and that's how I'm so excited about this, is we added to the advanced hunting that you might know is a Defender paid capability, part of the Defender for Endpoint, a log analytics analysis. So basically, what we did is we created a workbook, and we created DCR. So that workbook and that DCR can be used and leveraged into Arc-enabled systems for you to basically ingest that data at scale into a given log analytics resource. Okay, and so you have multiple sources of systems, clients, servers feeding data into that workbook, and then you can analyze in basically real time without having snapshots of EVTX being exported and things like that to what's going on. And that's how we did it. So for that, in our documentation also, we have a link to it, which is in here somewhere. I'll find it for you, where we have this link to the workbook. There you go. Right, and that workbook will basically took you to this page that I have previously opened for you. So basically, this is a workbook that we created that will allow you to go and deploy your subscription. We have the typical deploy to Azure buttons. So if that's okay with you, we're just going to go ahead and deploy any instance of those workbooks, even though I already have deployed. Will be easy. It's very simple. And we have some documentation about what needs to happen. The process, as you know, is you have a workbook, and then this workbook has a dependency, in this case, to a specific event, the same event that I told you before. So what we did is also create a DCR, which is a data collection rule that works also with Azure Monitor to capture those events in your Arc-enabled resources. That's basically the process. So number one, we go on and we click in here. But instead of doing it in this VM, I'm going to switch to my other system and see how that works. Okay, so here we are. We're going to go ahead and deploy to Azure and just follow that process. Please let me know if you need to me to zoom it a little bit.
Yep. No, so good so far. So if I understand correctly, for people who are not like the daily thing is not Azure, right? So what we are basically doing with this workbook is basically you have like your servers already Arc connected. They probably already have the monitoring extension installed. So what that happens is actually you send from these on-premise servers or edge servers, you send data to this like general log space in Azure. And now with this workbook, we basically do two things, right? We do basically say, okay, what additional data should be collected in terms of like the events you just described, which are happening in the event log. And then also, you will show us that later. We will get some nice view on this, what is actually happening,
Exactly.
right? Is that
Exactly.
correct? Okay.
That is correct. Yeah. So basically, the only two things that you need to specify is obviously a resource group, region, and name, right? So we can do whatever Thomas demo, right? And then a workspace ID and the workspace location. Basically, as part of that Azure Monitor pre-configured experience that you might have with, as you said, the Azure monitoring agent already in place, you might have already a log analytic workspace. So at the end of the process, Thomas, as you can see, the workbook gets deployed. Super important that you have that DCR connected to those systems. Remember, I'm not going to explain today how DCR works. But basically, you need to associate that new DCR created to those instances that you want to start collecting those additional events. Okay. And then you wait a little bit because DCR processing at the beginning takes a little bit, maybe 15 to 30 minutes. And hopefully after that, you're going to start seeing events. So here, what I'm going to do is to show you a little bit of the workbook. And then from there, we have multiple things. I could probably have another full session with you to show you all the things that we show, but we're going to go to the important thing here, which is let's grab the events that I show you already and export them. Okay, that's the very important thing that we're going to do today. So for that, if it's in Audit, as I told you before, you can go to see Audit events or block events. It's a matter of what you're looking for. You can see already there is this very same VM that is showing me there is block events in place happen, and you can see already those events. So at this point, you could go and decide, well, let me go and see more information about what's going on, when this happened, how important this is to me, or yeah, actually this is the application that I want to start allowing to run. Okay, that's basically the important piece. And when you analyze of this data that you feel comfortable with, you can filter the output of this and then export it. You can filter it by publisher, by the file names that you have, right? Like if it was more those two, you can do that. At the end of the day, you want to grab all the data that it matters to you and create policies. Typical example, let me tell you this. So if you have a more complex application, you end up seeing the same publisher, what we call designer, uh, for many of those files, or the majority of those. Like, for example, in this case, people like sysinternals, right, which, as you know, is an internal Microsoft a company for a very long time. Uh, Everything that sysinternal produces are mostly signed by the same publisher. Okay, meaning that you only need to allow once this publisher to allow the whole battery of sysinternal tools in case that was needed. Just for be super clear, today's sysinternal tools are allowed by default in our default policy. But this is a very old version of sysinternal tool that I keep it on my toolkit to demonstrate this scenario, right? So it's using a very old signer that is not allowed anymore. That's why, right? You see, it's actually, you see, from 2010 to 2013, you see, I've been in the rodeo for quite some time using these two. Okay, so at the end of the day, you go and export this data, Thomas. That's what it matters. And all that data is going to come up to you in a form of an Excel file. Yeah, I guess it's somewhere here, okay? In the Excel file, you save it, and then you consume it. Okay.
Okay.
I already saved it and copied a previous version of this before today's call into the demo. Let's say VM. So let me just show you how it looks. Basically, what you're gonna get is basically the same representation of, those files that you were seeing in the workbook, um, in a comma separated value format. Basically, everything that you saw there. So you see there is nothing new, like the timestamp. You see like the publishers, hashes, something like that, right? But the good thing is, as I mentioned to you, the new tool or the augmented capability that we did recently to the App Control Wizard allows me to go on parse this file. So I
Okay.
can just go on parse this file. When that
Yeah.
happens, right, I'm ready to go. So instead of having two applications from one node, I have like 20 applications out of 200 nodes. I mean, I did tests of, like a couple of thousands of files in it. You can see the whole list. Okay.
Yeah. So
And
this
then
is
from
actually, so this topic is an important part, right? If I want to just do it on that one single server, I can take the event log, and that's great and whatnot. But as you mentioned, like the Excel spreadsheet we just downloaded from Azure Monitor really includes like all the data. If I have like thousands of servers, it
yep.
includes all that data, right? So it's not just that single server. It really has everything in it, and I can basically
Exactly.
build it on top of
Exactly.
that. Nice.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing, right? Because one of the important things that the workbook does for you is in some of those views is put together the same files across multiple servers. So you might end up seeing like, there is a group of maybe administrators in your company that they want to use the same tool across
Mhm.
systems, maybe for goodness, right?
Yeah.
So you detect that and then you talk to them, hey, explain me what this tool is. Oh, we're doing this for, I don't know, whatever, archiving files, something like that. Okay,
Yeah.
we do the review of that application. If it feels safe, it looks safe, okay, we're going to give it a try, and then you go and collect that data. And then you can also see trends or things that they're not allowed, right?
Hmm.
Meaning, okay,
Yeah.
there is something running something across my entire fleet that's no bueno, so I might want to take a closer look to that too, okay? Okay,
Yeah.
so at the end of the day, I see the data, I see, as you can see, the events. For the sake of the recording, 3077 basically means a block action, which actually reflects back to that filter that we have in the workbook, remember, that we did block. Okay, so here is one important thing. In the best case scenario, all your application will be signed, right? It basically
Mhm.
has a certificate that uses signature to basically say, okay, this application is coming from this source, this publisher, whoever it is, third party, first party, and it has this certificate in it. Um, but what happens if that application does not have a signer? Can you deal with it? The answer is yes. So basically, App Control allows you to do multiple things. In this sole view, what you can see is basically how deep you want to go in allowing this application. Let me give you an example. So let's say that this is internal application that you're willing to allow. You can go not only for who issued this certificate, who is the publisher, basically, who is the company or the entity behind
Mhm.
assigning this certificate to this binary, but also you can even go by what we call the internal name of the executable. A very
Okay.
typical stupid way that hackers has to manipulate customers is they rename an application that
Yeah.
looks like the actual good application with the wrong name, right? So
Mhm.
basically, this artifact is being renamed to Trustworth by default application. So you can see the actual real name that is coded within the binary, not the file system name.
Yeah.
And you can even go further and look into the version of that file, meaning, okay, so if you are part of my IT team, and we know this application is going to be used in a, critical or sensitive environment, we may want to lock the actual version.
Yeah.
So if a new version comes in, it will need to pass through this validation process before it gets allowed. That means
Yeah.
maybe passing a scan testing or some validation, maybe functional validation too. So you can go even to the version itself. And that's how you remember I explained to you how a given version of BG info was blocked. It's using the same data. So we're
Yeah.
blocking bginfo.exe, but with a given version. So in the same way that you can do denies, you can do allow rules. and you decide. So in this case, we can go, to every every property that the file has, or we can just go and say, you know what, let's just allow everything coming from this issue with this publisher, and then you do add to the policy. That's
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Okay. And then similar thing with the other one. You see exactly the same thing, or you can go and say, you know what, for this one, I want to take to the version number for whatever reason, and then you click add. And then as a result of that, this thing will create an XML. And that's basically the XML that you're going to pass back to OSConfig.
Okay.
That's
So that'll
basically it.
be the supplemental package or whatever you call it. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. At this point, almost yes. Okay. So let me explain you one more step. So
Okay.
now what you have is actually a policy. It's a policy that can be a supplemental policy or can be a base policy. In
Okay.
this scenario, the difference is base policies needs to binaries. When you have multiple base policies, needs to be authorized across all of them. Otherwise, they won't run. Supplemental, as the name says, supplements the previous one, so can do a small, um, incremental steps into that process, which is what we actually tell you to do. Don't trust me, just read through it. So
Yeah.
if you go through that process, it tells you, okay, so how you do this. Basically, I told you one version is the AVTX, and the other version is grabbing the data from the workbook, use this tooling, and then at the end of the day, you're going to get this XML. So when you have the XML stored somewhere, like as we do today, how you actually link this XML to my base policy. Okay, and we give you the how. This is the how. So
Okay.
basically, as a best practice, we recommend you to tune this XML to make it the supplemental policy of our base policy. Basically, actually, you want to put versions in it. So there is, you see this small commandlet that will push the version. It's called set CI policy version. And it will also give you more information about, I don't know, what this policy name is. If you want, you can put a name, things like that, right? So I call it whatever you like. And then the key aspect, and that's important for you and for everyone listening to this, is this information. Or default policies, right? The default policy that we ship with OSConfig for app control, it always has this ID.
Okay.
So when you put this ID into the supplemental base policy ID, that's how you make this XML to be my supplemental policy.
Okay.
Okay, and we always take care that the base ID of our policy is always the same. Okay,
Makes
so
sense.
you can confidently go on to implement our base policy. It will always be the same. Okay, and that's basically how you do it. And then finally, as you can see, you do the set and apply the policy. So I already have that in here for you. So let me just go ahead and do it. Well, actually, I think I already did, but basically you see this is copy paste of what we did. I only changed
Yeah.
the XML that the tool exported, and then apply this. And then as a result of that, I have this guy. Okay.
Okay.
So this is a fancy way to look into what we just created for you to see. And then you can see basically that in our case, you see that these two files are the two files that we were allowing. Okay, so my
Yeah.
previous, what I did is took to the bottom or basically to all the properties, and you can see the minimum version for this file is associated to those executables. And that's what it is, right? So basically we create this concept of what we call file rules, which basically saying, I'm gonna allow these two signers, you see, that actually has this file attribute associated to this rule, which is this information here. That's
Okay.
basically how you can form the policy, nothing else. So I have all that already created here for the sake of time. So just to confirm, what we're going to do here is one more time. If I do core, that will fail. If I do this other executable, you see they fail. And then I only need to go, hopefully, if everything is in place, let me make sure that these guys are the same. I should have an event log file, 715. Yeah, that's it. And I'm just going to go ahead and throw all this in here. Okay, there shouldn't be anything new. Okay, so I'm going to paste all these in here. And actually, I made the same mistake. Okay, don't do the remove yet. Okay. So now, Thomas, you see I just pushed the policy that we just created. Again, I'm going to try to use this guy. You see now works. And this other executable just works. And then at the end of the day, if you look to our documentation, you can see, okay, show me now how my policies looks like how many policies do I have, and what the name or information about it, some sort of a local inventory of my policies. So you should have the default policies plus this new supplemental policy that we created. Okay, so that I call, in this case, my apps policy. Okay, that's basically the new policy that allows these ad hoc applications to run. And then you see everything else that we had before, including or enforced policies that we had in there. Okay.
Yeah. So you have like all of these, like, which are the Microsoft standard, and then you have now the My App policy, which is basically your supplemental policy in that case. Now, I have one question. So we talked about how getting all these events from different systems, and you also, I think, mentioned that I can obviously have multiple supplemental policies, right? So what would be the strategy to do this? Would I, like, if I have an environment, let's say I have 100 servers, they do obviously different tasks, would I recommend to like do it more granularly and have like supplemental policies for file servers and then supplemental policies for mail servers, and then I have maybe one which goes over all servers? Is that kind of like, I mean, I'm sure that's
absolutely the way. Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the things that you may not want to do is to have all the same applications allowed across all your servers, right? I mean, there's no need for that. If you, again, maybe you use the same backup application across your entire fleet, so that's one of, like, horizontal application that you're going to allow across your systems. But then if you have vertical application that they're only used in a certain scenario, I don't know, your Hyper-V servers or your, as you said, your file servers, then I would just create those policies and apply those in those scenarios. That leads me to another important thing that I want to show you very quickly, because at the end of the day, you already said, I might have policies that goes across my entire fleet, and then I will have policy that goes in different buckets. How I see this at a scale, right? So the workbook that we created not only allows you to do this of, seeing what's being executed and all that, but we have another nice view or tab, which allows you to actually see that information. Basically, that will just pull policy events. So you will get an inventory of all the different policies that you have across your ecosystem, where there were either being added or being removed, right? So you can see what's the actual policy lifetime in your basically environment, and you can see there is policies being continuously added into a given system. Maybe that's something that you want to look at. Guess what? Someone who might be just created a policy called My Apps and added in enforce mode into this guy. It was you, Thomas. that's exactly what we just did, right? So you can see that. And another thing that we try to expose in here is when you are switching from enforce to audit, we highlight that to you too. That's cool, because you might see maybe something is trying to flip to audit
Mhm.
for a malicious reason, so you can get that visibility too from policy point of view. So that's basically your inventory. So we have few filters here. I'm not going to go into the detail now, but I'm definitely asking you all to go and play with it. But basically, if you look across your systems, you might see all the latest policy that has been seen for every OS in that time window that you have here before, right? For example, every time that you boot or reboot your system, the policies get activated because this is actual another event. We collect events, obviously, remember? So we'll get one event per node per the list of policies they have. And that's, you can see like, wow, this guy is the first time that I seen it in this period of time. You can see that too. And if you
Mhm.
remember one last thing that I can show you, I'm so proud of the team who did this is, remember I told you about the behavioral setting that a policy has, all right?
Yeah.
So many of them are only applicable to the base policies, and very few of them are applicable to the supplemental policy, because basically you don't want a supplemental to change the way that the structure works. But when you choose one of those, like for example the one that we just applied um, for this system right now, you will be able to see in the bottom part all the information across those policies. And then if you keep scrolling down, you will see these behavioral settings. We call those option rules. And we
Okay.
have a nice link in our documentation that basically tells you everything about every single setting of those. But basically, we are offering you a view where you can see all the policies across all your systems. You can have a filter to see the latest activity per policy per system. You can filter them by user. Like for example, if someone choose to change the policy, you can filter by knowing who made that change, and we can
Okay.
see the details of that given policy. Or someone introduced a new policy, you can see the details of that policy. And as you can see, right, those are a system. What means that probably this system just reboot. So the system account activated this policy. But then someone with this set, which is me running as that account that I show you, already made, as I show you, flip to audit, go to enforce, flip to audit, go
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
enforce. We did it all that. So you can see all that relationship, right? Thing like that. And that's basically how you can understand all the changes that are happening on your system. So I hope you can enjoy also these very interesting view about policies.
Nice. No, this is fantastic, Carlos. I love it. I love also, so there's obviously like the way this is all implemented, right? So you can use it like locally, implement it in your Azure environment, sorry, in your Windows Server environment. But then the challenge is, okay, I want to have this centralized management capabilities. And obviously you could use potential other monitoring solutions. You can go for these events, right? And all that. So you don't have to. But then the power now we added with Azure, and I imagine an environment, especially when you are in this hybrid or even a multi-cloud environment where you have like different edge locations, you have branch offices, you have retail stores, whatever you have, and you run Windows Server everywhere. And it can get quite complex to get all that monitoring data in. And then also, let's say other cloud providers. With this, with Arc, you get all these things shipped centrally to Azure, and then with the Azure Monitor, you basically can get like a perfect central view with this workbook. You get all that information centrally. You can see what's happening. I love like how you can even see who flipped like the different modes. So yeah, really, really cool, cool stuff here.
Yep. You nail it. Basically, I couldn't say it better, Thomas.
No, thank you very much, Carlos. Again, one more question, and I'm sure I know already the answer. But if I want to start with this, or if the viewers of this video want to start with this, where should they go?
Yeah, well, I'm sure you would do, but down here in this video, you're going to get the link with the documentation that we shared today. And hopefully you only need to follow those instructions and enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much, Carlos. Thank you, everyone watching, and I hope I see you in another video very soon.